Regret. Mamselle Orly possessed a good strong figure, ruddy cheeks, hair that was changing from brown to gray, and a determined eye. She wore a man's hat about the farm, and an old blue army overcoat when it was cold, and sometimes top boots. Mamselle Orly had never thought of marrying. She had never been in love. At the age of 20 she had received a proposal, which she had promptly declined, and at the age of 50 she had not yet lived to regret it. So she was quite alone in the world, except for her dog Ponto, and the Negroes who lived in her cabins and worked her crops, and the fowls, a few cows, a couple of mules, her gun with which she shot chicken hawks, and her religion. One morning Mamselle Orly stood upon her gallery, contemplating, with arms akimbo, a small band of very small children who, to all intents and purposes, might have fallen from the clouds, so unexpected and bewildering was their coming, and so unwelcome. They were the children of her nearest neighbor, Odile, who was not such a near neighbor, after all. The young woman had appeared but 5 minutes before, accompanied by these 4 children. In her arms she carried little Lodi, she dragged Tinami by an unwilling hand, while Marcline and Marclette followed with irresolute steps. Her face was red and disfigured from tears and excitement. She had been summoned to a neighboring parish by the dangerous illness of her mother. Her husband was away in Texas, it seemed to her a million miles away, and Valsin was waiting with the mule cart to drive her to the station. "It's no question, Mamselle Orly, you just got to keep those youngsters me till I come back. Dieu sait, I wouldn't bother you with 'em if it was any other way to do. Make 'em mind you, Mamselle Orly, don't spare 'em. Me, there, I'm half crazy between the children, and Lon not home, and maybe not even to find Maman alive encore." A harrowing possibility which drove Odile to take a final hasty and convulsive leave of her disconsolate family. She left them crowded into the narrow strip of shade on the porch of the long, low house. The white sunlight was beating in on the white old boards. Some chickens were scratching in the grass at the foot of the steps, and one had boldly mounted, and was stepping heavily, solemnly, and aimlessly across the gallery. There was a pleasant odor of pinks in the air, and the sound of Negro's laughter was coming across the flowering cotton field. Mamselle Orly stood contemplating the children. She looked with a critical eye upon Marcline, who had been left staggering beneath the weight of the chubby Lodi. She surveyed with the same calculating air Marclette mingling her silent tears with the audible grief and rebellion of Tinami. During those few contemplative moments she was collecting herself, determining upon a line of action which should be identical with a line of duty. She began by feeding them. If Mamselle Orly's responsibilities might have begun and ended there, they could easily have been dismissed, for her larder was amply provided against an emergency of this nature. But little children are not little pigs. They require and demand attentions which were wholly unexpected by Mamselle Orly, and which she was ill-prepared to give. She was, indeed, very inapt in her management of Odile's children during the first few days. How could she know that Marclette always wept when spoken to in a loud and commanding tone of voice? It was a peculiarity of Marclette's. She became acquainted with Tinam's passion for flowers only when he had plucked all the choicest gardenias and pinks for the apparent purpose of critically studying their botanical construction. "'T ain't enough to tell, I am, Mamselle Orly," Marcline instructed her, "you got to tie, I am in a chair. It's wet Maman all time do ween he's bad, she tie, I am in a chair." The chair in which Mamselle Orly tied Tinami was roomy and comfortable, and he seized the opportunity to take a nap in it, the afternoon being warm. At night, when she ordered them one and all to bed as she would have shooed the chickens into the hen house, they stayed uncomprehending before her. What about the little white nightgowns that had to be taken from the pillow slip in which they were brought over, and shaken by some strong hand till they snapped like ox whips? What about the tub of water which had to be brought and set in the middle of the floor, in which the little tired, dusty, sun-browned feet had every one to be washed sweet and clean? And it made Marcline and Marclette laugh merrily, The idea that Mamselle Orly should for a moment have believed that Tinami could fall asleep without being told the story of Croque Mitaine or Lou Garo, or both, or that Lodi could fall asleep at all without being rocked and sung to. I tell you, Aunt Ruby, Mamselle Orly informed her cook in confidence, me, I'd rather manage a dozen plantation, than children. It's terracent. Bont. Don't talk to me about children. T'ain I spected sich as you would know everything bout 'em, Mamselle Orly. I see dat plainly yistiddy when I spy dat lil chilly playin' wid yo, basket o' keys. You don, know dat makes chillun grow up hard-headed, to play wid keys. Dey like it make 'em teeth hard to look in a lookin' glass. Them's the things you got to know in the raisin and management o' chillun. Mamselle Orly certainly did not pretend or aspire to such subtle and far-reaching knowledge on the subject as Aunt Ruby possessed, who had raised 5 and buried 6 in her day. She was glad enough to learn a few little mother tricks to serve the moment's need. Tinam's sticky fingers compelled her to unearth white aprons that she had not worn for years, and she had to accustom herself to his moist kisses, the expressions of an affectionate and exuberant nature. She got down her sewing basket, which she seldom used, from the top shelf of the armoire, and placed it within the ready and easy reach which torn slips and buttonless waists demanded. It took her some days to become accustomed to the laughing, the crying, the chattering that echoed through the house and around it all day long. And it was not the first or the second night that she could sleep comfortably with little Lodi's hot, plump body pressed close against her, and the little one's warm breath beating her cheek like the fanning of a bird's wing. But at the end of 2 weeks Mamselle Orly had grown quite used to these things, and she no longer complained. It was also at the end of 2 weeks that Mamselle Orly, one evening, looking away toward the crib where the cattle were being fed, saw Valson's blue cart turning the bend of the road. Odile sat beside the mulatto, upright and alert. As they drew near, the young woman's beaming face indicated that her homecoming was a happy one. But this coming, unannounced and unexpected, threw Mamselle Orly into a flutter that was almost agitation. The children had to be gathered. Where was Tinami? Yonder in the shed, putting an edge on his knife at the grindstone. And Markline and Marklet, cutting and fashioning doll rags in the corner of the gallery. As for Lodi, she was safe enough in Mamselle Orly's arms, and she had screamed with delight at sight of the familiar blue cart which was bringing her mother back to her. The excitement was all over, and they were gone. How still it was when they were gone. Mamselle Orly stood upon the gallery, looking and listening. She could no longer see the cart. The red sunset and the blue-gray twilight had together flung a purple mist across the fields and road that hid it from her view. She could no longer hear the wheezing and creaking of its wheels. But she could still faintly hear the shrill, glad voices of the children. She turned into the house. There was much work awaiting her, for the children had left a sad disorder behind them. But she did not at once set about the task of righting it. Mamselle Orly seated herself beside the table. She gave one slow glance through the room, into which the evening shadows were creeping and deepening around her solitary figure. She let her head fall down upon her bended arm, and began to cry. Oh, but she cried. Not softly, as women often do. She cried like a man, with sobs that seemed to tear her very soul. She did not notice Ponto licking her hand.